Anyway, so the video started off a little bit with Israel and the Middle East, and then it moved into Russia. So the video, I guess the part we saw was mostly about Putin, and it was kind of funny. Thomas Friedman, he asked, did Putin snap? So did he become weird or something? And it wasn't. He's saying that it wasn't really that he snapped, but it was what Obama was saying was that it was because when he was going from the prime minister to president, there was basically his power was challenged. Putin, when he didn't have as stronger power as what he had before when he was president, then became prime minister, then he became president again. During that time, on the first two, when he was first president, he had a lot of power. When he became prime minister, well, he lost a little bit of power. So he needed to regain that power to get back to prime minister. So what Obama was saying was that Putin was challenged for that power. So in order to gain what he lost, he needed to become a bit more nationalistic, a bit more right-wing. So in order to become nationalist, he needed to prove that he's a nationalist so that he can get all the right-wing or the nationalist following so that he can gain power. So in order to do that, the Ukrainians, when Obama was saying that it wasn't a grand scheme, Putin didn't plan everything in Ukraine, and it sort of happened because basically Putin wasn't ready for it. So the problem in Ukraine happened, and Putin needed to react. But because he gained the power through nationalism, that he needed to maintain the nationalistic idea to maintain Ukraine. So, the power behind Putin is very nationalistic. So Obama is saying that it's a very challenging and dangerous time because of that. And it's dangerous because the separatists, the people that want to leave Ukraine, the Russian people of the the western side of Ukraine is more Ukrainian, and the eastern side is Russian. So basically it's splitting. But because the separatists, the eastern side people, they have weakened, that Putin needs to keep face. He needs to be able to, even if he's going to leave Ukraine, he needs to be able to keep face towards the nationalist people, or the nationalist people that are backing his power. So that's something that Obama sees as something that is dangerous. And another thing that Obama and Friedman was saying was that Friedman asked whether Putin could be used to stabilize the Middle East, because the story or the whole interview started with the Middle East, I think. So Friedman asked Obama whether, if that is possible, to use Russia to use Putin in the Middle East, but Obama probably doesn't think so, and he moved into the interview moved into the Ukrainian story. And a lot of questions in the newspaper. There's a reviving question saying, is America going to be in another Cold War with Russia because of Ukraine? There's also questions whether China, if America is going to become in another Cold War with China. But Obama's answer was that he probably doesn't think that there's going to be a new Cold War between the United States and Russia. So that's the kind of Q&A or the answer that Obama was giving about Ukraine. And there was an interesting question by Friedman. What's the biggest takeaway being president? Obama's been president for 5 years now, almost. So what's the biggest takeaway being president? And he was talking about how the world has become globalized, not just through him, but also through Clinton and Bush administration, that there's a new middle class, and people are becoming more prosperous than they were a decade ago. And an analogy or something that Obama was saying was that developed countries, over 50 or 60 countries, met together to challenge AIDS and tuberculosis and other global epidemics that non-developed countries are facing. And another example that it was showing was that Africa has now become much more developed. And in the past, Africa was more about developed countries giving aid to Africa. But now, developed countries are getting into Africa to invest and to build new businesses. So Obama's example is saying that that Africa, China is getting into Africa, America is getting into Africa, and I was watching the news yesterday, Japan is getting into Africa. So a lot of countries are getting into Africa, not just to give money, but to actually start businesses and do things like employment in Africa. So that sort of thing, I think, is what Obama's saying, that the undeveloped countries are slowly becoming developed. So that's one example of what one of his takeaways being president. The second point that Obama was mentioning was pivot to Asia. So we've done this in this seminar a couple of times, numerous times. But the pivot to Asia. Obama was actually saying people don't understand what pivot to Asia is. And a lot of people probably don't. But what he was saying was that America, the United States, is showing up in Asian politics and Asian strategy. And he's saying that the alliances with Japan, Korea, and Philippines have become stronger than it was. And the United States sees the Asian countries, especially their alliance with Japan, being very important to the strategy or the United States strategy in the Asian Pacific. So he's also mentioning that the importance of ASEAN and how the United States are becoming gradually influencing things in the ASEAN negotiations. And he's also talking about commercial opportunities of the United States in Asia also, and how businesses are creating new opportunities in the Asian market. So that's basically what the interview was. I think it was about 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So it started off from Putin. It started with Middle East, and then it moved to Putin, then it moved to Africa, and then the pivot to Asia. So that's how the interview sort of moved.